The flames made a sound I'll never forget. Not a roar, not a crackle, but a whisper, like the house was begging me not to leave. I remember standing on the lawn barefoot, clutching my dog, watching the home I built turn into a bonfire courtesy of the one person who once complained that my mailbox was 2 inches too tall. When the sirens wailed, she stood there across the street in her pink bathrobe, holding a mug of coffee, like she was watching fireworks. The neighbors whispered, but nobody said what we were all thinking. Karen from the HOA had finally lost her mind. It all started 6 months before the fire, back when my biggest problem was trying to mow the lawn before her daily patrol. Karen treated the HOA like a religion and herself as its prophet. If your garbage can was visible for more than 12 minutes after pickup, she'd leave a typed note in your mailbox signed, "With love, the HOA." When I painted my door a shade of blue that didn't align with community standards, she made me print out 3 color samples and submit them to the board. The woman was unstoppable, like a bureaucratic hurricane in yoga pants. At first, I tried to keep the peace. I'd smile, wave, pretend I didn't see her measuring my grass with a ruler. My wife said ignoring her was the best move, but ignoring Karen was like ignoring gravity. It didn't make her go away, it just made the fall harder later. Things escalated when I decided to install solar panels. To me, it was a step toward independence. To Karen, it was an act of rebellion. She called an emergency HOA meeting, handed out pamphlets about aesthetic pollution, and started referring to me as the defector. That was the first time I realized she wasn't just annoying, she was obsessed. Then came the notes. Not the HOA letters, personal ones. Slid under my door, sometimes at night, always unsigned but obvious. Your attitude doesn't reflect our values. Some people don't belong in this neighborhood. Watch your step. I reported it, but the police just shrugged. Unless she threatens you directly, it's not a crime. Easy for them to say. They didn't have a Karen living across from them with a camera pointing at their driveway 24/7. The night of the fire, I was out late fixing the fence she'd complained about that morning. My wife was visiting her sister. The wind was still, the stars sharp. Then I smelled it, gasoline. By the time I turned, the porch was already glowing. I ran for the hose, but it was cut. Every instinct screamed that I needed to get out. The fire swallowed the house in minutes. The whole time she watched. No panic. No guilt. Just that same faint smile she wore when she fined people for leaving Christmas lights up too long. They found the gas can in her shed 2 days later. Security footage from another neighbor showed her walking across my yard that night, something in her hand. Even then, she tried to claim it was all a setup. "He's always been against me," she said in court, like I'd burned my own house just to spite her.
The jury didn't buy it.
Neither did the judge. The sentence came down, 10 years for arson, reckless endangerment, and property damage. You'd think that would be the end, right? Justice served, story over. But life doesn't wrap up neatly like that. 2 months after her conviction, I got a letter from the court. She'd appealed. And since I was the main witness, I had to attend the hearing. The irony didn't hit me until the morning of. She'd be back in the same courtroom, same orange jumpsuit, and this time, she'd have to face me again. Walking into that courtroom was like walking through the ashes of my old life. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or just sit there numb. When they brought her in, she looked smaller, older, but her eyes still carried that same unhinged glint. She smiled at me like we were neighbors again, like none of it had happened. And that's when I realized something chilling. This wasn't about the house anymore. It was about control. She'd rather burn everything than admit she'd lost. That was the day I decided this story wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about how far people will go when their sense of power is threatened. And how sometimes, the fire doesn't end when the flames die out. But tell me, what would you have done if your neighbor burned your house to the ground and still smiled in your face? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next chapter gets darker. I thought seeing her behind bars would make me feel safe. Turns out, fear doesn't care about court rulings. Even with Karen locked away, she still lived in every creak of my new house, every flicker of light that lingered too long on the porch. I'd catch myself checking the windows at night, half expecting her silhouette across the street. My therapist called it trauma. I called it Tuesday. The insurance company rebuilt fast, too fast, almost like they were racing the ghost of the old house. Neighbors brought casseroles, hugs, and awkward silence. Nobody mentioned her by name, but her presence hung over us like smoke that wouldn't clear. They'd say, "How are you holding up?" And I'd smile, pretending like I didn't still dream about the sound of wood snapping in the fire. But deep down, something in me had shifted. I wasn't just rebuilding walls. I was rebuilding trust in people, in safety, in the idea that one crazy neighbor couldn't undo your life. Then, 3 months after the sentencing, the letter came. No return address, just my name scrawled in that tight, perfect handwriting I'd memorized from years of HOA notices. I didn't even have to open it to know.
Still, I did.
Inside was a single sentence. You can rebuild a house, but you can't rebuild peace. No signature, but who else could it be? My stomach turned cold. The postmark was from 2 towns over, the same correctional facility where she was being held. I took it to the cops, but they said prisoners send letters all the time. Unless there's a direct threat, they said, we can't do much. That night, I sat on my porch staring at the ashes of the old oak tree that once shaded our lawn. It hit me then. She wasn't done. Even from inside, she wanted to control my peace. That's when I decided to stop being afraid and start fighting back, not with fire, but with exposure. I began documenting everything. Every letter, every incident, every weird phone call that hung up as soon as I answered. I posted updates online, under a pseudonym at first. Turns out, I wasn't alone. There were dozens of people from other neighborhoods who'd crossed paths with their own versions of Karen, petty tyrants hiding behind bylaws. My story blew up. Views climbed, comments poured in. Some found it funny, others found it terrifying. I didn't realize I was becoming part of something bigger, a community of people reclaiming their stories from bullies who'd turned civility into a weapon. But success comes with shadows. One night, I found a note taped to my new mailbox. Different paper, same message style. Stop talking, or next time it won't just be your house. The handwriting looked like hers, but how could it be? She was still inside. I showed it to the police again. They said it could be a copycat, maybe someone trying to stir trouble. I wanted to believe that. But something about the timing, the day after one of my videos hit 100,000 views, felt too perfect. I installed cameras, alarms, motion lights. My yard looked less like a home and more like a movie set for paranoia. One night, I got an alert from one of the cameras, movement near the back gate. When I checked the footage, I saw a shape small, hooded, fast. They didn't try to break in, just stood there for a few seconds, then disappeared. The next morning, another letter. You still don't get it. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Every sound made me flinch. My wife came back home and found me sitting in the dark with a baseball bat. She said we should move, start over somewhere new. But I couldn't run again. Not from this. If I left, it meant she'd won, even from a cell. Then the call came from the district attorney's office. Karen had filed for an early hearing, some legal technicality, something about good behavior. The officer on the phone said I wasn't required to attend, but it might help the case if I did. I didn't even hesitate. I wanted to look her in the eye again, to see if she still had that smirk, to remind her that I wasn't afraid anymore. When the hearing day came, I wore the same suit I'd worn at the first trial. The courtroom smelled the same too, wood polish and tension. When they brought her out, I braced myself. She looked thinner, frilier, but the eyes were the same, bright, calculating, defiant. When she saw me, she smiled again. Not a kind smile, but the kind that says, "You're still mine." And then she said something under her breath that made my blood freeze. She whispered, "Nice house you rebuilt." The judge started talking, but I barely heard a word. My mind was spinning. How did she know what my new place looked like? Who told her? Who'd been near my property? I realized this wasn't over. This was just round 2. Tell me, what would you do if the person who tried to destroy your life was still finding ways to reach you from behind bars? Would you run, or would you fight back? Let me know in the comments, And don't forget to like and subscribe, because trust me, the next part gets personal. The day after the hearing, I couldn't shake that one sentence out of my head. Nice house you rebuilt. It echoed every time I opened a door, every time I looked out the window. I tried to tell myself she was bluffing, that she'd seen photos online or guessed. But paranoia doesn't need logic, it just needs a crack to crawl through. And by then, my mind was full of them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I walked outside to clear my head. The air was heavy, the kind that makes silence feel loud. My security lights flicked on automatically, one after another, like something was moving just ahead of me. I froze. Nothing. Just the hum of the streetlight and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I turned to go back inside, then saw it. A single footprint in the flower bed, fresh, right by my window. I checked the footage, hands shaking. There was again, a shape, shorter this time, maybe a woman, maybe a teen, wearing a hoodie. Same as before. The figure walked right up to the window, stood there for almost a full minute, then vanished into the dark. I took the video to the police the next morning. They said the resolution wasn't clear enough to identify anyone. Could be a prank, one of them said. Could be kids messing with you after seeing your videos. I wanted to believe that, but something in my gut told me otherwise. A few days later, I got an email from an anonymous account. No subject line, just a video attachment. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The first few seconds were black, then a voice, hers.
Karen.
Calm, clear, like she was hosting another HOA meeting. Hello, neighbor, she said. You've been busy telling stories. I thought I'd tell one too. The video cut to footage of my front yard. Not old footage, recent. The mailbox, the porch, my new car in the driveway. The angle was low, like someone crouching in the bushes. Then her voice again. You can't rebuild peace. I called the police immediately. They traced the email to a burner account routed through multiple proxies. Could be her, the officer said. Could be someone on the outside helping her. That word, helping, stuck to me. Who would help her? She'd been the neighborhood villain for years. But then I thought of someone who'd always seemed to hover on the sidelines. Dale, the HOA treasurer. He was quiet, polite, and always defended her during meetings. I hadn't seen him since the fire, but rumor had it he'd been visiting her in prison as a friend. So I did what any rational person with unresolved rage and a slight internet addiction would do. I started digging. Public records, social media, local news archives. It didn't take long. Dale had quit his HOA position 2 weeks after her sentencing. No one knew where he'd gone. But what I found next made my skin crawl. He'd recently applied for a job at the same construction company that rebuilt my house. I called the foreman, pretending to be a journalist. He confirmed it. Dale had been on site multiple times, just checking measurements, he said. I hung up, heart pounding. That's how she knew. She had someone watching. Someone feeding her details, keeping her involved. And now I didn't just feel angry. I felt hunted. I decided to confront him. I waited outside his new place, an old trailer park just outside town. When he came out, I could barely keep my voice steady. Why are you still helping her? I asked. He looked startled at first, then something shifted in his expression, guilt mixed with fear. You don't understand, he said. She knows things. About everyone. About me. He started to say more, but a car pulled up behind me and he froze. The window rolled down, and for a second, I caught a glimpse of a face, a woman, wearing sunglasses, smirking. My stomach dropped. By the time I turned back, Dale had bolted inside. The car sped off before I could even grab the plate number. I stood there in the dust, realizing that whatever this was, it was bigger than just revenge. It was a game, and I was still playing by her rules. That night, I posted another video, this time addressing her directly. You wanted control? Here's your audience, I said. You burned my house, you haunted my life, but you don't own me anymore. It went viral. Millions of views overnight. People started tagging her name, sharing the story everywhere. For the first time, I felt like I'd taken something back. But 2 days later, another message appeared on my porch, tucked under a rock. No envelope this time, just a single Polaroid. My house. Taken from across the street. The caption written in red ink. Round 3. Tell me, what would you do if your enemy promised a round 3 and you had no idea when or how it would start? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The next part might. I stopped checking the cameras. Every alert felt like a ghost tapping on my shoulder. Sleep came in fragments, stitched together by bad dreams and caffeine. My wife tried to convince me to leave town for a while, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I ran, she'd win again. I told myself that round 3 would never come, that she was just bluffing from behind bars. I almost believed it, until the night I came home and found my front door unlocked. Nothing was stolen, nothing was broken, but something was off. The air felt disturbed, like someone had been walking around, touching things. My desk chair was turned slightly, my coffee mug in the wrong place. Then I noticed the photo on the hallway table, our wedding picture. The glass was cracked clean across the middle, right through my face. I called the police, again. They searched the place, found no signs of forced entry. The officer looked at me like I was just another guy cracking under his own paranoia. He said it might have been the wind, or maybe I'd forgotten to lock the door. But I hadn't. I remembered turning that key. I always did. A few days later, I got another letter, slipped under my door this time. No envelope. Just a folded sheet of paper, written in her perfect handwriting. You can't rebuild peace, it said again. But this time, there was more. He tried to tell you. You didn't listen. I knew instantly it meant Dale. I tried calling him, no answer. I drove to his trailer again. This time, his door was slightly open. I knocked, pushed it wider, and stepped inside. The smell hit me first, burnt plastic and something sharp, metallic. Then I saw him. Dale was on the floor beside his overturned chair, motionless, his laptop still glowing on the table. The police later ruled it suicide, carbon monoxide poisoning, but there was something about the scene that didn't sit right. His computer had a video playing on loop, one that stopped me cold when I looked at the screen. It was me, standing in my driveway, recorded from across the street. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. After that, things blurred. News vans parked outside. Journalists called me, the man haunted by his HOA neighbor. My inbox flooded with sympathy and conspiracy theories. Some said Karen had a cult following, others said she was using someone on the outside to keep her story alive. None of it felt real. What did feel real was the message that came to my phone 2 days later. No number, just words. Nice suit. See you soon. I took it straight to the police. They finally assigned a detective. He told me they'd investigate possible accomplices, but he also warned me about feeding the fire by posting online. She thrives on attention, he said. Don't give her what she wants. Easy advice for someone who hadn't watched their life catch fire twice. I decided to dig where they wouldn't. I went through Dale's old laptop, trying passwords, guessing patterns. After hours of trial, one worked, her name, all caps. Inside were dozens of files. Pictures of my house, screenshots of my social media, even recordings of my phone calls with the insurance company. But the last file was what broke me. It was labeled Plan C. The file contained a list of dates and addresses. The next one was mine. And beside it, one word. Finale. That night, I packed a bag and drove out to a motel 30 miles away. My wife thought I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was closing in. At 2 a.m., I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, it was silent for a few seconds. Then her voice came through, calm, steady, almost amused. You left the porch light on, she said. Then she laughed, soft and short, before the line went dead. I drove back home before sunrise. The house looked fine from the outside. But as I stepped closer, I saw something sitting on the porch, a burned piece of wood, shaped like a house, wrapped in a red ribbon. My phone buzzed again. Another message. You can't rebuild peace, but you can watch it burn. That was when I realized she didn't need to escape to reach me. She'd already done it. She'd built a network, a story, a myth, and somehow I was part of it. Every video I'd posted, every view, every comment, They weren't just reactions. They were fuel. I'd turned her into a legend. So, I did the only thing that made sense. I recorded one last video. I told the truth about the fire, about Dale, about the fear. I told people that stories like this don't end with justice, they end with obsession. I uploaded it and turned off the comments. Then I shut down my account. Now, I don't know what comes next. Maybe she's done. Maybe she's still out there, watching from someone else's window. But tell me this, if someone burned your life down and the whole world kept watching, would you stop telling the story? Or would you keep talking, just to prove you're still here? Like and subscribe if you'd want to know how this ends, because something tells me it isn't over yet. I didn't plan on coming back. I told myself that video would be my goodbye, the end of her, the end of me being the guy with the crazy HOA neighbor. But endings are stubborn things. They don't always show up when you expect them. 2 weeks passed in quiet. No letters, no messages, no shadows at the window. For the first time in months, I started to believe maybe, finally, it was over. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps on the door, right after midnight. Not pounding. Not frantic. Just patient, polite, like someone who knew I was awake. I froze in the hallway, staring at the wood grain of the door. My breath held so tight it hurt. I didn't move for nearly a full minute. When I finally did, I checked the camera feed on my phone. Nothing. The porch was empty. I exhaled, told myself it was the wind again, or maybe some teenager playing games. Then I noticed the timestamp. The footage skipped a whole 20 seconds of static right over the moment of the knock. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse to check if she was still inside. The clerk looked at me like I was insane. "She's still serving her sentence," he said. "No transfers, no releases." I wanted to believe him, but a small voice in the back of my head whispered otherwise. I needed proof. That night, I went back through every file from Dale's laptop. One folder I hadn't opened before was password protected. After a few guesses, it unlocked. Inside were scanned letters between her and someone labeled only as C. The earliest dated back to her first month in prison. The most recent was just a week old. Each one read like instructions, cold, methodical. The last message ended with, "He's ready." The finale starts when he returns. I didn't understand what he meant until I checked the attached document. It wasn't a plan, it was a deed transfer. To my house. Filed under a company name I didn't recognize, but the buyer's representative? Caldwell Associates. The same name on Dale's old mailbox. The same man who had been at every HOA meeting sitting quietly next to Karen. It hit me like a punch. She'd been buying back the neighborhood from the inside, one property at a time. And mine was next. The next day, I went to my lawyer. He checked the records, frowned, then said something I'll never forget. "Technically, you don't own your house anymore. It was transferred 2 days ago." My throat went dry. "That's impossible," I said. But he was right. Someone had forged the paperwork, every detail perfect, my signature, the notarization, even the filing date. Whoever did it knew everything about me. That night, I drove home knowing it might not be mine anymore. I parked down the street, lights off, just watching. A car was already there, parked in my driveway. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. Blonde. Confident. Smiling. Not Karen, but someone younger, with the same sharpness in her eyes. She looked up at the camera over the porch and waved. Then she took out her phone and started recording. It didn't take long to find her online. A brand new channel. No videos yet, just a profile. HOA Justice Stories, Season 2 coming soon. Her banner read, "Inspired by true events." And there, in the comment section of her first community post, was a message from an old account. The one I thought was gone. "Welcome to the neighborhood," it said. That's when I understood what she'd done. She didn't need to win the court case. She didn't need to escape. She just needed to outlive the story. To make herself unforgettable. To become an idea, one that others could carry. She burned my house, my peace, and now my story belonged to her. I thought about deleting everything, disappearing for good. But maybe that's what she wanted, to turn me into another ghost in her legend. So, I did the opposite. I turned the camera back on. I filmed myself standing in front of the house, one last time. The new owner in the background, smiling for her thumbnail. I said, "You can rebuild walls, but you can't rebuild peace."
She was right about that.
But maybe peace isn't the point anymore. Maybe the point is to tell the story before someone else does. I looked straight into the lens and added, because if you're watching this, and you think you're safe from people like her, you're not. She doesn't just live next door. She lives online now. I paused, let the silence hang heavy, then asked, "So, what do you do when your enemy becomes a legend?" Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next time you hear about an HOA gone wrong, remember, it might not be fiction anymore.